So before I actually begin the video, I just want to ask you guys a simple question. Have you ever felt alone, like truly alone? Have you ever felt alone despite being surrounded by friends or family, but you don't know why? If you don't want to answer it, it's okay. I've been there and I know how you feel. And I just want to say, it's gonna be okay. That's all I wanted to ask before I begin the video. Yeah. So, if you can't already tell, this video analysis is going to be a bit different from my previous entries due to some of the topics I'm going to be discussing. It's going to be a bit, what I would like to call it, a bit more human. And I do want to give a fair warning that some of the things I'm going to be discussing might trigger some of you. It might give you some anxiety, because I'm gonna go into depth about this. So if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, I would recommend click off this video before I begin. And with that being said, let's jump right in with that warning out the way. So if you can't already tell, I'm gonna be discussing A Silent Voice. It's one of the first and few anime that have ever actually made me cry. It's one of the few anime, it's actually the first anime that truly broke my heart in a way that I thought this wasn't possible, that only a few pieces of media have actually ever done so. Some notable ones I would have to mention would be Christopher Nolan's Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey. That's such an incredible film, and it really did get me tearing my eyes out towards the end. Another film would have to be Hachi, A Dog's Tale, and I don't want to explain that because it's a dog's life and I don't want to ruin it, but it's just really sad. I remember watching it when I was 13 on the bus in Mexico in Spanish. That really made me cry. But the point of this video is not to talk about other pieces of fiction. I want to get down into A Silent Voice. What makes it special for me, why it made me cry, and why it still resonates with me to this very day. I only discovered the film because my brother recommended me to it a couple years back when everyone was in lockdown, quarantine was happening. My brother recommended me this film called A Silent Voice. He's like, oh, it's an anime that's gonna make you cry, and he's like, you're gonna like that because you might be into that kind of stuff. I kind of laughed it off. I'm like, an anime that makes you cry? What am I, 5? Who watches stuff like that makes you cry? Like, I've never been into sob stories. I've never been into romance type of stories. But he recommended it to me anyways because he thought I would like it. So I gave it a shot. I still remember watching it to this day, clear as day. It was back in 2020. It was April. It was a rainy day, and I decided to get some snacks, turn on Netflix, lay on my bed, and just kick back and watch it, thinking not too much of it. And here I am 2.5 hours later, just crying towards the end. Like, that was a beautiful film, and here I thought I wasn't gonna cry, but I ended up crying. What A Silent Voice means to me is something that I can't really explain. If I could go back in time and rewatch that film for the very first time, I would tell you exactly what I felt. I can only vaguely remember it, but I wish I could go back in time and tell you what I felt that same day. But one of the notable things that has stuck with me throughout the years, ever since watching that film, was its meaning behind loneliness and what it represents. At the beginning of this video, I asked you guys a simple question on if you've ever felt alone. I'm sure you have. It's honestly only natural to feel that way. And I don't blame you if you don't tell people about some of the stuff you go through. I feel the same way. I don't tell people how I feel sometimes, and it's pretty bad. It's natural because humans in general have always been such a social species. We thrive in an environment full of other people. Despite being surrounded by good or bad people, it has a major influence on our minds. If we're not surrounded by others, we tend to go insane. That's why whenever people who are locked up and solitary for quite a while, they end up losing their minds, because humans in general are just a species that have to have a connection with others. And that's what a silent voice encompasses. It tells the story of an emotion, of a feeling, something that pulls at your heart. The way some of these characters feel is something we can all very much relate to, something that we've all related to in the real world that hits a bit too close. We've all been in their situation. Maybe not you and I, maybe someone around you has, but we've all been there. We know what it feels to feel alone. And it's kind of tragic and poetic in a way. At first glance, you may think you know the story of a silent voice, the story of a boy who bullies a girl, and in return he gets bullied and tries to befriend the girl he bullied a couple years later, and they form a strange friendship. But the thing that bonds them together is their mutual feeling of loneliness, how one feels more empathetic while the other one feels more apathetic. And that just may be the cut and dry paste, the niche of the story. But that's not in reality what the story is at all. If you look a bit deeper into the story, you might find there's a deeper meaning behind the story. Not just the story of a boy who befriends a girl through their mutual feeling of loneliness. I'm honestly not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, whatever the field is of people who study emotions or psychology, the brain functions. I am not either one of those. I'm not qualified, so I can't give you my best notes. I did remember taking a class back in my early days of college on psychology, and some of the things I learned in that class is pretty interesting. It will help you understand this video just a bit better. One thing I do remember is nature versus nurture. It's one of the very first things that we ended up discussing, whether if you're raised a certain way, how it affects you, or if you were always born that way. For example, if you were born as a bad person, will you always be a bad person? Or if you were born as a good person, but you grew up around the influence of other people who were bad, and it ended up turning you into a bad person, which had the most effect, nature or nurture? It's something you learn in science, something you learn in psychology. It's something that I still think about to this very day. Every time I meet people and they act a certain way, I think to myself, were you born this way? Or were you raised this way? Now, why does any of this matter in the first place? How does psychology matter? Well, when dealing with an emotion such as this, such as loneliness, it can be a bit difficult to understand and comprehend. Now, the actual definition of loneliness essentially means a state of being alone, something we all can relate to. A lot of factors go into this, depending if you were emotionally abused, if you were hurt in any way, perhaps physical, or it's inherently genetic. You may be sad because you were born that way. It may sound a bit cringe, it may sound a bit emo, but you may have been born sad, or you just like being sad. A lot of factors can really go into this, so it's not something as easy to understand. Even some scientists don't understand why people feel alone. It's a bit difficult to pinpoint where it all originates from. It just has a lot of factors that vary into it. Sometimes it can be on purpose. Like I mentioned, you do want to feel like an outcast, so you put this weight, this burden on your shoulders. For example, at this moment, I'm sitting here alone recording. I feel alone. Yes, talking about some of this stuff brings memories of stuff that I rather not remember. But at the same time, I'm not lonely because I really don't feel lonely at this moment. I'm talking to you, I'm talking to the audience, but I don't feel alone at this moment. I just feel calm. I don't really feel sad. I feel like a calm lonely. I don't feel like a sad lonely, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I'm just kind of glad that I'm alone in my room right now, being able to record this video. But it's a bit difficult just to describe it, like I mentioned. Now, there is several different types of loneliness when dealing with this. Overall, there's 3 different types of loneliness that are going to be pretty important to understand this video and some of the characters and overall this video. There's emotional, social, and intimate loneliness. Now, the last one, intimate, you may find that one to be a bit interesting because typically most men will tend to suffer from that. Now, what does it mean to be intimate? Well, it sounds exactly what it sounds like. It's basically to form a bond in a romantic way with someone. Social usually means yes to, do you like to be around people? Emotional, it's something that you bring down upon it. I'll discuss that much later, but I really want to focus on intimate. Now, most men tend to suffer from intimate loneliness. It means not being able to find someone on your level, on your compatibility. For example, most men feel intimate loneliness due to the fact that they've been cheated on, and they think to themselves, what did I do to deserve this? I could have been better to not have been cheated on. That's usually most men will suffer from intimate loneliness because they do suffer from this. Most men nowadays, or in general, have always suffered from loneliness, but due to the way our society is run, not to get political or anything like that, but in general, most men are pretty lonely. Most men do not and will not tell you how they feel. Like, I'm not gonna tell my friends how I feel because I'm a man and I was raised to not cry, to not tell people how I feel. While most women, they tend to feel a variety of all 3 of the other emotional states: social, intimate, and emotional loneliness. They tend to feel all of that, and it's okay for them to feel that way because society deems it necessary, because they are women, they are girls. It's okay for them to express their emotion, while most men, they really can't. There is no coping mechanism for us men to feel that way because our society tells us we're men, we have to deal with this, and it's just something that was never taught on us. That we can't really blame ourselves because we can't just tell others how we feel. It's just something that's not been inherent. Women are okay, men, they are not. Now, let me tell you the meaning behind the others because it's quite interesting. Each one of the characters that we are introduced throughout the film are portrayed as living in their own unique little worlds, their own little bubbles, you could say. They deal with their own problems in their own unique ways. Such as Nishimiya during the beginning of the story or throughout the story, she's very happy, she's very cheerful, but behind that cheerful, nice smile of hers is just a sadness that cannot be explained. She suffers from emotional loneliness, meaning she brings everything down on herself. She blames everything that has ever happened to her. The reason she has no friends, she blames it on herself. She's not thinking straight. She's just using her own emotion to bring herself down, and everyone around her is completely blindsided because she doesn't really know how to express this due to the fact that she is deaf. It's always had an impact around those around her and around her family. Her family, they believe they understand her, but they really don't, because they don't know how she feels. Our main protagonist, Shoya, he was a bully at the beginning of the film. We see his background, how he bullied Nishimiya due to peer pressure, and that doesn't really excuse what he did to Nishimiya. It's never right to bully someone due to the way they are, due to how different, no matter how big or how minor they are. It's never right. You can never justify bullying someone because you never know what kind of effect it's gonna have on someone else. He is what I would like to consider a social outcast. He suffers from social loneliness. Now, what exactly does social loneliness means? It means being excluded from those around you. When he was younger, he was portrayed as being everyone's friend. He was friends with everyone, and ever since he bullied Nishimiya, and in turn they ended up bullying him, he started to be a social outcast, not on purpose, but due to the way he was bullied. He was ignored by everyone, and he started suffering from social loneliness. He had no one to talk to. He didn't really suffer emotional loneliness. He never blamed anything upon himself. Everyone just kind of blamed it on him, and not having friends around him led him to being this lonely, decrepit kid who at the beginning of the film tried to just end it all and just get it over with, because he couldn't handle the pressure of being an outcast by everyone he once knew. Some of the other minor characters that we are introduced throughout the film, such as Nishimiya's sister, is never really portrayed as being sad. They are lonely, they are alone, but not out of any of the three factors of emotional, intimate, or social loneliness. They just kind of hang out by themselves. They do enjoy being alone. Some people are like that. They are pretty cheerful about that. In a way, her little sister is pretty cheerful. She doesn't mind being alone, but she's very, very protective of her older sister due to what she suffered in her past, due to bullying and the traumatic experiences she's had. But what's sad is she never understands her own sister. She never notices the signs that her sister is suffering. She's suffering from depression. She's suffering from emotional loneliness, but she fails to recognize any of that. Just like in our real world, how some people fail to notice the signs of those around them. It's never too late to ask, how are you? But in this case, she did fail, and she only realized it until it was far too late. Another character that we are introduced is Shoya's very first true friend that he ends up encountering after his bike ends up getting stolen at, I can't remember the name, at I might butcher the name, Tomohiro is a very cheerful person. Sure, he's kind of an outcast due to the way he looks. He's kind of bullied, but not necessarily. He's kind of picked on due to the way he looks, but it doesn't really ever get to him like the way Shoya does. He's happy just kind of being alone. And Shoya and Tomohiro end up forming this kind of interesting dynamic where one is an outcast on purpose while the other one is an outcast by nature. And it's really interesting because he never falls in that category of, oh hey, I'm sad, but not really. He's a bit ignorant. And saying ignorant might be kind of offensive, but I would say Tomohiro is a bit ignorant to Shoya's abstinence, to Shoya's loneliness. He knows Shoya is pretty lonely, and he's the one that ends up encouraging him to go end up talking to Nishimiya and forming a friendship, but he's very abstract. He fails to notice the signs of Nishimiya as well. Despite getting along with her, he just ends up failing to realize the signs and how Shoya is going down a happy path, yet kind of a dark one. Honestly, it's all too common, what the characters feel and what they've gone through. I've seen it happen. I've been in their positions before. I've had experience like that. Believe me, it's not very nice. It's not very comfortable to feel what they have felt. I was neither Shoya nor Shoko in these situations. I was more like Yuzuru, who was very blissful, very cheerful, but yet at the same time very ignorant to what was happening to those around me, to those who were actually going through stuff. But I never once bothered to ask because I was too afraid, or I was too ignorant, because they would leave me and just end up being alone. I was always scared to let them go. How some of these characters act is only natural, because it's only natural for us humans to act that way. I don't really blame Yuzuru for being ignorant of her sister, because how could you blame her? She's only 13. She doesn't really know any better, but that's still not an excuse. You can always spot the signs. Or like Tomohiro, who's a very cheerful guy, he knows Shoya's pretty sad, a bit depressed, and he tries to influence him, tries to cheer him up by being his first friend, but he can't always be there for him. None of us can always be there for that person that's going through this kind of situation. It's very difficult. But the difference between Shoya and Nishimiya is that Shoya was and is trying to make a difference. He's trying to change himself from the beginning of the film, where he tries to end it all, and then he has a realization that, what's this going to do to everyone around me? Well, Nishimiya does not. She doesn't really think of anyone else. She's thinking only and only of herself. She's not thinking of others. She does think of other people, but she thinks the wrong way. She thinks everyone else would be better off without her. No one would end up remembering her. But it's only till she ends up befriending and re-meeting Shoya that she starts to self-doubt herself if it was ever worth it, if all those negative thoughts was just because she was doing it to herself. The only reason she's never had any friends was because she was putting the blame and the trouble on herself. Now, the climax of the film is something that was always difficult for me to watch, because when I first watched that part of the film, I had to pause it because I didn't believe she was actually going to do it, and it was kind of unexpected because I thought she was going to just end it. In a way, it was a mirror, it was a reflection of what Shoya was trying to do at the beginning of the film. The difference is she would have succeeded had it not been for Shoya's last intervention, because the only reason the climax led to that way was because Shoya, or Nishimiya, was trying to make an excuse that she forgot her sister's camera and she was gonna go get it, but in reality she was just trying to end it all, similar to how Shoya at the beginning of the film was making an excuse to just end it all, so that money he was just gonna give it to his mom secretly and then just kind of end it. But once you get to the climax of this film, it kind of breaks your heart. It's really poetic. It's really poetic tragedy that you see her doing and trying to attempt, but ultimately failing and doing what she does. Shoya ends up being the one who saves her from her own mistake, and it's only till then, when she's hanging off the cliff, that she realizes, I made a mistake. I should have never done this. But by the time she realizes it, it's far too late, because then Shoya falls down and he ends up being in a coma for a while, and he's the one that ends up in the hospital. I'm sorry, this it's just kind of hard to talk about. Shit. Now, the ending of A Silent Voice is probably one of the most beautiful endings I have seen in any anime film in a long time, and it doesn't leave you sad. At the same time, it doesn't leave you happy. It leaves it kind of open-ended, because you end up seeing Shoya recovering from the hospital, and then you see him reuniting with Nishimiya, and they embrace one another. They laugh and they tell each other it's okay we don't have to be alone anymore because we have each other, we have our friends. Ultimately, you end up seeing the other minor characters who were bullying both of them grow and learn. And what's really beautiful about the ending is that you see Shoya, the main protagonist. He's what I would consider the main protagonist of this story. Nishimiya was just the motivating factor for him to finally move on, because it wasn't until the end of this film that you start to see him learn to forgive others, to learn to forgive himself, and to learn to trust those around him. So all the X's that you saw on people's faces, you start to see it disappear slowly and slowly, and then you start to see Shoya's face fill up with tears of not sadness, tears of happiness, the fact that he doesn't feel alone anymore, the fact that he kind of has Nishimiya, Tomohiro, and all those around him as friends. He can see everyone for who they really are now, for people rather than just marks, ghosts, whatever you want to call it. It's something that brought tears to me. It made me feel, I don't feel sad, but I feel happy. After watching the end of the film, it always resonated with me, that ending's saying it's okay to hate yourself, but don't hate others. You can always forgive, but never forget. And that's what Nishimiya ultimately ended up learning. She ended up not forgetting, but she ended up forgiving. Same thing with Nishimiya, or I'm sorry, with Shoya. He ended up learning to move on from the state that he was stuck in. It only took a near-death experience for him to learn, while Nishimiya the same way. Kinda deep. Also, if you've noticed throughout this video, I'm not using the same background as my previous videos. I kind of have this background where my bed is, my two flags, bunch of plushies. Yes, I do love plushies. And yeah, I just wanted to change up the background just a little bit. Also, I changed my hair pretty recently, if you can't really tell. I think it looks pretty cool. Only reason I did it just because I recently watched Cyberpunk Edge Runners. I've been obsessed with that series, so I decided I'm gonna go future look, change my hair white. And yeah, be on the lookout for that video. I might not be posting it this week because I'm busy doing some cosplay stuff for New York Comic Con. You can check out my other channel for that. And yeah, also be on the lookout for a Rent-A-Girlfriend video and why we love it. Something like that, but be on the lookout for a Rent-A-Girlfriend video, Cyberpunk Edge Runners video. So yeah, with that being said, let me know what you guys think of this video, what you thought of this different type of tone. And yeah, do you guys like my new background? If not, I'll switch it back to the old one. So yeah, with that being said, just check out my other videos. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok, and yeah, be sure to support my clothing brand, gumdropstudios.com. We are live, we sell merch like this. So yeah, not much going on, but I'll catch you guys on my next video. So peace out, stay positive, and yeah, be healthy. Peace.